We begin our story in wisdom at the Antler Saloon, where patrons gather for morning coffee. If you want to know the Big Hole, this is a good place to start. It's where we meet John Wilkie and Rich Lawson.
John Wilkie, but I'm retired, been here since forever, practically. My grandfather came here in 1881.
We're kind of a stronghold for the old stuff.
The old stuff is the jackleg and worm fences that stretch from one end of the Big Hole to the other. After coffee, the men tell us about the skills they both learned as boys building fences.
I built a fence when I was on the ranch, when I grew up on the ranch. They were all jackleg fences in them days.
John ran a sawmill and built everything from houses to pedal airplanes for his grandkids. Rich worked for the Forest Service and the Highway Department. He learned how to build fence from his dad.
Father worked ranch foreman on different ranches, and you do a little everything. Fencing, irrigating, riding.
This is the old style jackleg with the cross notch.
The jackleg is built in a line.
Now this is what they call a worm fence.
The worm fence is constructed in a zigzag pattern.
When it's sideways like that, it'll stay straight up and won't fall over.
Both jackleg and worm fences are built above ground. You don't need to dig holes for a post because there are no posts. They're sturdy fences for the valley's sometimes uneven, wet terrain.
They're put up a lot of times in swampier ground.
This bottom log is the foundation for this worm fence.
And that keeps the fence from sinking into soft ground.
When the foundation log rots, you can jack up the fence and replace it.
You can get a lot more life out of it.
Jackleg and worm fence material was accessible.
There wasn't a lot of wire fence here because of the availability of material. And they could go up and cut a load of poles and put them up and build a really nice fence.
The rails are notched to fit the jack. The jack is the X-shaped structure you attach the rails to.
When you're building a fence, you try to get your big end of your rails all going the same direction.
Rich built this jackleg fence 30 plus years ago.
And it needs replaced now, surely, but that's a pretty good return on your money.
Rich and another foreman oversaw crews building this fence for the Forest Service in 1979. It stretches a good 10 miles, but some of it burned in the wildfire of 2021. He also made gates like this one at Mike Paddock's post and pole plant. Mike supplies round rails and splits for fences.
I've been building this and cutting this timber, since I was a kid.
He says lodgepole pine is the best material for a fence.
And it has to be pretty tight grained and straight without any defect.
But he says timber isn't as available as it used to be.
Wood fence, rail fence is very, very beneficial if you're running horses or any livestock, really. The problem with it nowadays is it's so expensive to put up. It's really hard to afford or justify how much a wood fence is going to cost if you're living off of selling cows.
Mike says many of his customers aren't working ranchers anymore.
And it's like housing developments, and they come in and they buy 20 acres and they want it to look like the Big Hole.
But in the Big Hole, it's hard to break old habits.
Yeah, they still build them quite a bit. This one here is not too old.
The fences are part of the Big Hole's heritage, but so are the men who know how to build them. When we come back, the jackleg and worm fences of the historic Hershey Ranch. The jackleg fence on the Hershey Ranch stretches for miles, and that's just what you see from the road. The jackleg and worm fences are everywhere on the ranch.
We're looking here at a piece of jackleg fence that we just recently built. It's here at our heifer camp. You don't have as many cows trying to crawl through and whatnot. It's meant, this is a little holding pen.
Richard Hershey is the 5th generation Hershey on the ranch. This is the family's home place.
Moved here in the late 1800s. They were Swiss immigrants.
First, they had a dairy to make cheese. Then they started raising beef cattle. They haven't stopped ranching, and they haven't stopped building fences.
That's agriculture in general, It is hard work, but it's the most rewarding hard work I think there is.
Richard works the ranches with his mom, Heidi.
Yeah, we expand well throughout the Big Hole, and a big family, cousins and everything.
Fencing is family tradition. Richard's grandpa, Dick Hershey, knew how to build a fence.
And he was, you know, a really hard-working man. I think it comes with the generation, but he, you know, he loved especially building fence.
When you get done with a fence like this, you know you've accomplished something.
You've got a pound of nail for every rail. You know, there's 5 rails on a jackleg fence and 1 rub rail on the opposite side. So, you know, you got to notch your rails with your axe and pound your nails.
The Hersheys have a number of worm fences. This one is a special relic.
Still stands here in our old cabin shed. It's getting pretty well rotted through, but we kind of keep it for a little bit of nostalgia.
The Hersheys discovered a long time ago that fences like these worked especially well on parts of their ranch.
Because we get so much frost and moisture in the ground, and because of that, the jacklegs having a good brace design, you know, they last a lot longer than, say, you know, pounding posts with some wires that just kind of, you know, get to leaning over with time.
The family even has its own mill to process the materials to build and repair their fences.
If you're able to, you know, source your lumber to build your jacklegs, I think it's easy.
Oh, my name is Garrett Hubanks. I am a ranch hand here at the Hershey Cattle Inc.
Garrett works with cattle and horses on the ranch. In the summer, there's irrigating and there's always fencing.
Yes, sir. I've started fencing. That's how I got into my ranching career. And then I've fenced all over Beaverhead County, and then also traveled fenced, you know, other states.
Beaverhead is the largest county in Montana with a fairly sparse population, but it probably has more jackleg and worm fences than just about anywhere in the country.
I've never seen any more jackleg in one valley than I have in the Big Hole Valley, sir.
Yeah, you know, you get out here and people kind of get stuck in their ways a little bit, but that's kind of, tradition is key. Something that you don't find anywhere else, you know, that people, they kind of see and they're like, oh man, that's different.
The Big Hole is different, from the beaver slides built to put up loose hay to the jacklegs and worms.
The labor intensive part of it, you know, it makes you feel good, like you've actually built something. You get done, you can look back on what you built.
Handcrafted, practical works of art. Kevin Mackey, NBC, Montana.